Howdy folk, Greenside Project here, and this is my video response to Old Git and Faaron's new channel competition. So I'm going to be doing a bit of talking, chatting about the questions they've asked to enter the competition, and whilst I'm doing that I've got a few new minis, and by new minis they're not particularly new for me necessarily, but I've not shown them off in my video before and they do tie into the questions. So I got into the hobby in about 1996. I was in my second year of secondary school. I remember it quite well. I had a friend, it was his 13th birthday, his family took him to Games Day, and he came back with Gorka Morka, which, for those of you that do not know or do not remember Gorka Morka, it was a orc-based skirmish game, very heavy on transport. You got lots of trucks and trikes and things like that. These two models themselves aren't from the box set, although the box set did have what I'm pretty sure were the first proper modular plastic infantry, in that they weren't just static poses. There were sets of legs, sets of heads, sets of arms. In fact, the sets of arms on these models, or on this model certainly, and actually on both models, are from the Gorka Morka box set. Orcs, they were spares. But these are metal models sold separately. They went along with the range. These were two orc youths, so a bit skinnier, a bit ganglier, a bit more adolescent than your standard orcs. And I had them for years in a bits box unpainted. Then, comparatively recently, like a couple of years ago, found them. I was going to a friend's for a couple of weeks because I had to go there for work. I was doing some research over there, and took them with me, took a few paints and painted them up. You see, I've not even based them, but anyway, so at the time I got into the hobby, Gorka Morka was brill. There was a low entry point. It was low cost to get into, as skirmish games are invariably. The fact that the kits were modular were really cool. It meant that you could do all sorts of conversions. Because it was orcs, conversions didn't exactly have to look good to look authentic. There was lots of dry brushing and painting things big, thick green, but it was immediately, you know, there was a real sense of humour with the Gorka Morka rulebook. Lots of talk about crashing dem trucks and red ones going faster and all that sorts of things. I remember a graphic description in one of the injury charts where you could roll dice to see what injury had befallen one of your clan, about someone having their eyes ripped out. And it was written so well, really amusingly, a very dry bit of writing from the Gorka Morka rules team. Always sticks in my mind. So that's how I got into the hobby. Orcs, which is weird really, because after Gorka Morka, I've never really been an orc collector guy. I think I had one of the old war bosses when the first war boss that was in the large arm base came out a while back. I mean, I do mean a while back, like 10 years ago. But apart from that, not been much of an orc guy, and these are the only orcs I've painted since getting back in the hobby. Moving on, let's talk about my favourite army. And, I mean, at the moment I'm Talon crazed, but I think historically the army I've always been most interested in are dwarves. I love dwarves. You've seen this gent before. He was the dwarf from the Warhammer Quest box set. But all these other dwarves, he's metal. All the other ones are metal from GW's old dwarf range. Some of them do go back a fair bit. They're also a bit dusty. And I started repainting, stripping and painting these when I got back into the hobby right at the beginning of my time. So about 2 years ago. Yep. Actually think about it, almost exactly 2 years ago when I started to go into the hobby, got these out my attic, and some of them are very, very old. This gent, for instance, is a Citadel miniature from pre-Games Workshop days that was in a box that wasn't even mine, it was my uncle's, many years ago in the 80s. Old metal dwarves, which I refurbished, and they were the first time I really spent time painting minis, trying to get the squad looking good. You can see on this guy here, I tried very early, quite primitive attempt to get some marble on his mallet. And these are just my standard infantry dwarves. You can see I didn't really know much about resin bases or anything at the time, so what I did was I got an awful lot of green stuff and moulded their own bases, which I didn't even really understand how to use green stuff properly at the time, so pretty time consuming. But I really enjoyed it. I got a lot out of it, learnt a lot of lessons. It was before I really watched anything on YouTube, so I read tutorials on how to paint, but I didn't see anyone else doing it, so there's a bit of guesswork going on, and, you know, all things considered, they're not a bad or awful looking set of minis. Also the first banner I ever painted, which I was quite chuffed with, although it looks a bit sparse to my eyes now. But anyway, so I love the dwarves, or at least I love the old range of dwarves. I really hope they get some new models out soon. The current range of dwarves, personally in my humble opinion, just aren't quite quirky enough for my tastes. I like slightly dumpier, slightly quirkier dwarves like Games Workshop used to make. Favourite model? My favourite model changes day by day, but this is a model that was really important to me because about a year ago I was having a bit of a downtime on the hobby, mostly because, well, I'd started a new job, it was really work intensive, I didn't have much time to paint. I'm sure I'm not the only person that finds, when I don't have much time to paint, my painting skills, my dexterity, my muscle memory, anything like that, absolutely gets destroyed. So then when I do paint, I'm really naff at it. I've got no brush skills, I'm not precise at all, so I enjoy it less, so I paint less, and it's a vicious cycle. And then last Christmas, my girlfriend brought me this Skaven Doom wheel from Games Workshop, which was a lovely surprise. And I think I watched Warboss Ty painting this, because I was still watching videos and watching other things on the community, although it was a fair time before I started posting any videos. And I was inspired enough to start getting it out, undercoating it. I did it all, I painted everything in its individual components before assembly. But when I completed it, I was really proud of it. I mean, there's things I do differently now, but if, for instance, it was the first time I ever managed to get these warp stones looking nicely highlighted, highlighting some black there with sort of a light blue-grey, bit of freehand up there and up there I was quite proud of. By the time I'd finished this, I was right back into the hobby, and not soon after that I started taking the Dark Angels a bit more seriously, trying to get them painted, and started thinking about starting my channel. So this was a really important mini for me, in that it got me really back into the scene. And it is brilliant. I mean, it's a rodent in a big flying death wheel. Who doesn't love a rodent in a giant death wheel? And I mean, as for what appeals to me about the hobby, I'm very much a collector. I've tried the gaming, I've talked about that a little bit in previous videos. I'd still like to do more gaming, and I certainly, when I'm getting an army now, like for instance with the Talon, I'm reading the books, I want my army to be legal. But what really gets me is the collecting and it's the assembly. It's I mentioned work once or twice, pretty elliptically, but I talk about work as a big part of my life. I love my job, but there are quite a lot of stresses in there. I find it really therapeutic to paint minis, assemble minis, and collect them. It's sort of like a mini bit of art therapy. I think of it in a, in a sort of nice, soothing way. I love the collecting aspect of it too. I think part of the reason that I tend to, at the moment, be looking for things like Talon is it's not quite as simple as just looking them up on the internet. It's about finding them on eBay, finding ones in good quality and things. It is a collector's hobby. We all call it plastic crap for a reason. I think that's most of the answers sorted for the competition. I hope you'd enjoyed this small dance through memory lane. I'm going to have to go now because my phone's very nearly out of both battery and space. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you so much to Old Git for the plug. That was truly amazing, and thank you very much to both old subscribers and any new subscribers, especially those who've come through Old Git's plugging in me. That was so kind of him. I really appreciate it. So probably you'll hear from me next weekend. I love you all. Take care and bye.